Today, we want to share with you some new stats, new information we've gotten about podcasts, and talk in particular about pod fading.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a term, if you've never heard it before, it's basically where you quit podcasting, where you stop podcasting, but your podcast is still listed on iTunes or listed in any directory. So the feed is live.
Some people might think of it as a hiatus, but that hiatus can sort of gain momentum and become an extended hiatus.
Yeah, so you think, oh, I'm going to retool our show. It might have happened to us. Anyway, I'm going to retool my show, and I'm just going to take a few months off, and then the next thing you know, the few months are 6 months, and then it's a year, and you haven't posted any new episodes. And this happens to a lot of people. It's because you know, you guys are in the midst of it. You know that podcasting is a lot of work. There's a lot of interviews. I mean, oh gosh, I think I did 4 calls today already, and it's only 1 o'clock. And so, you know, when you're through and you're doing that constant interviewing or constant recording or doing all of those things, it can get overwhelming, and you get busy, and, you know, as we call it, the marketing roller coaster, right? You know, you get really busy and you're servicing your clients and you forget to market again. And if your marketing is podcasting, you forget podcasting, you forget the power of it. And it can, the thing is that your podcast is out there. So you feel like at least it's got, you know, a certain level of exposure for me, so I'm good, but it can have an actual bottom line effect. So we want to help you avoid pod fading.
Right. Although I do want to address the fact that it is okay. A podcast can have an end in terms of publishing new episodes. I'm going to use our first podcast as an example. Our very first podcast was in a subject area of 3D printing. We did over 550 episodes. And our focus in business and in life changed. Now, we took a hiatus at one point because our daughter got married a couple of years ago, and that consumed a lot of our time for a couple months. And we took a couple month hiatus, but we came back, and we let our audience know what was going on, and we came back. But eventually, after 550 episodes and our, you know, priorities shifted, we really have not continued that podcast, but we've left it on iTunes, because there's a lot of great evergreen content there that people still work at. Can you double check that the microphone is set for this? Because it might not be. Yeah. So anyway, we ended up really not continuing that podcast, but we leave it up there. We leave it up on iTunes so that other people who would like to experience that can experience it. So pod fading can happen, but we just don't want to see it happening before you get through 50 or 100 episodes.
So I give this talk all the time when I'm giving speeches out there about podcasting and about the industry and all of those things. And I will ask the audience, I'll pull the audience and say, how many of you are podcasters? Okay, how many of you have reached 11 episodes? And how many of you quit? And how many of you got to 23 episodes and then quit? And there's always hands up, and they're all like, how did you know that number? And it's the statistical average. And the real reason for it is that it's usually a couple months into podcasting, right? So you've given it 2 months and you didn't get an immediate feedback. So when you're doing multiple episodes a week, it hits you at 23. And when you're doing just 1 episode a week, it hits you about 11, because you launched with a couple of episodes. You know, most people do. So, you know, looking at that, you hit a couple months in and you just didn't get audience feedback right away. You didn't get feedback that you were doing really well. And one of the first things that I want to point out about that is that you're looking in the wrong place. If you're looking at your podcast statistics, or your measurement is, I didn't make new and noteworthy, then you're looking in the absolute wrong place to see if there's an audience there. You need to be looking at your website statistics. Because if you're looking at your website statistics, you're seeing growth for your marketing as it is. And so that's why we like to put on our platform the website and the plays or the downloads in the same place, so that you can see really early on that there is a growth happening here, and I need to give it some more time. I need to be seen by Google. I mean, 2 months for some people who start a brand new website, you're just coming out of the Google sandbox. You're just being seen, found, and served up in the Google algorithm. So you may not have been there before. So that's where we really want to kind of catch people at the early stage and say, hey, if you're pod fading right now, it may be too soon, and you just cut yourself off before you were 3 feet from gold, to use that term, right? For those of you out there who know that, right? So you were just so close to like tipping the point of getting some feedback, and that would have made it worthwhile for you. So we want you to if that's the case for you and you're feeling that, set an evaluation time and put a call in, get on these coaching calls, ask us questions. This is a good time for us to kind of keep your momentum going, because there are indicators that you're doing things right. But there are so many people who have no support system out there, and that's why they quit at 11 and 23.
Right. If you get to 25, you get past that threshold of 25 episodes, chances are you're going to continue for a long time. Statistically, that's the way it is. And we have some new numbers. I gotta grab my phone over here. I forgot that. Sorry,
really
guys.
Close to the camera there.
I know. I apologize for that. But there is a new a new study that came out, and there's an article on Amplify Media.
We'll add it to the chat.
We'll add it to the chat. We'll put a comment in the Facebook post as well. So there's new data, okay, and it's according to one of the other podcast hosts out there, says that the number of total podcasts in the world has ticked up over 700,000, just over, about 706,000. And that there's approximately about 2,000 new podcasts are started every week, okay? But what they're saying is, of those 706,000 podcasts in the world all time, like from the beginning of podcasting to today, so going back, 14 years plus, maybe even 15 years ago.
Looking at everything in the iTunes directory.
706,000 podcasts, but only 20% are active, according to this study. Now,
18%.
18. Oh, okay. Well, 18 close. Yeah, you get technical on me. About 20%.
You usually do that to me.
Me?
Yeah.
No.
18%, or so less than 20%. That's like astounding, because I've been using the number because we didn't have a really accurate term, and of course it was from about a year and a half ago, so it was a little bit older. But I had been using the term about 300,000 active podcasts. And so,
well, according to this study, that was even very generous. Yeah. And so, I think, you have to, look deep into what's behind this study. And, there are different studies. And so you may believe this one, you may trust it, or you may think, well, it's a good piece of information, but there may be other points of data that they're not looking at. I think that's all possible. I think we should approach it with a degree of skepticism. However, it's a pretty good gauge and really shows you. I mean, let's just take for easy math, 20% of 700,000 would be 140,000 podcasts. Even if that's low and it's 200 or 250,000 podcasts, that number, I would much rather be competing in a pool of 250,000 competitors to be seen, heard, and found than just strictly not podcasting and trying to get my website out of the more than 1.5 billion websites on the internet to be fighting for attention. Right. It's a much smaller pool to be swimming in.
And
right?
Or all the videos out there on YouTube. And I mean,
gosh.
there's like 1 billion watched every single day. So that has nothing to do with how many channels. There's like 80 million channels on YouTube. So thinking about those numbers, this is a playing field. This is a pond. It's not an ocean, right?
Well, and doesn't it indicate that there is still a lot of opportunity? It is still not too late for many of you podcasters that are just starting out, maybe pretty new. Some of you on this call may still be setting up your podcast. That's okay. Don't be discouraged. The great news is listenership is increasing in podcasting. It is not too late to be getting into this, and you can be seen, heard, of course, and found. Right. So it's a wonderful time to be podcasting. It's better than ever, and the future continues to look bright.
Right. And so, one of the things that I want to point out about the numbers. So, the numbers can lie, right? And so this could be errant in that. So, because if we as a host based it on our activity rate, we'd have over a 95% activity rate. So
all of our podcasters?
All of our podcasters.
Yes.
Our podcasters don't quit, right? We have very few archive shows. And that's because our podcasters have the support of production, which is one reason. It's the the intensity of how much work goes into it. So if you started a podcast yourself and you're under the do it yourself model, that's where we see pod fading happening faster than we do in those that have production services. And so because you're not burdened with all of the processing and all of the things, so it doesn't feel as much of an interruption and you can keep going. So that's one of the things that we find where the company the host that put out this report, they have a lot of do-it-yourselfers. And they also point out in the report that the Anchor platform did the entire industry a disservice because they put out this like low cost, cheap hosting, practically free.
Actually, I thought no cost, right?
No, there was a no cost one, but there was some that was slightly paid. So you get your stats at like $10 or less. And they put this out there. They got a bunch of people who joined and then didn't have the wherewithal to set themselves up to get started properly. And so it flooded the sort of numbers, the statistics with barely launched podcasts. So, and that was problematic. And so that was a disservice that happened through the industry. So if we look at other hosts, we see that problem again and again. If someone goes in and puts into the low cost, paying usually $20 or less is what we see across the other hosting platforms. If you pay $20 or less, there's a higher percentage of pod fading in those worlds than those that pay $49 or more. And so, or $29 and more, because if you're up in that rate, and the real issue is that it has to do with commitment level. It has to do with how much value this is for your business, what you're looking for it from. It's a different purpose for it. And so we just see, so their numbers might be artificially low because that they are that type of host. And so that's just something to keep aware of. It's like, I don't always trust numbers. Like I always like to look at them and compare them, but I also look at my numbers and know I couldn't possibly post our poditized numbers because it would give people an erroneous idea about how many
how rosy a scenario it might be industry wide. Yeah, I think that clearly those of you that are brand casting with poditized services, the reality is you have that support, you recognize the value, you're spending some money to save time and get the most out of your podcast, and you're getting value, a return out of it. So why would you stop, right? So your chances of stopping are less unless you sold your business or something.
Yeah,
right?
And I do think seeing the web and the web stats and your podcast stats at the same time are showing that you're providing value to your business, and that I think is really helpful to a lot of people. So that's why I think my number one thing, if you're listening to this on the podcast side of things and you're not in our coaching group, which is where we're airing this first, if you're in that, I want you to take a look at a couple of things on your numbers and on what's going on in your overall before you say, hey, I'm going to call it quits. The first thing is I want you to take a look at your website growth. Have you grown in that month or 2 months that you've been podcasting? Have you seen it have residual value? And you may have to use Google Analytics or one of those services like SEMrush or any of those things out there. Go ahead and check it. And go ahead.
Well, I want to mention something about that. What we're finding, just so you know, is podcasts that get to 25 episodes and get there quickly, hopefully as quickly as possible. That's where it tips, and you start to see a lot more unique visitors to your website every month, and you start getting a lot more keyword rankings. It's actually the keyword rankings on your website from the podcast-related blogs that actually drive the unique visitors to your site. 25 episodes is a critical point. You can't expect to see it after, half a dozen episodes.
It's a little too soon. Yeah, so give it some time, but take a look at that. Now, if you are not blogging your podcast, if you are not even creating, now, we talk here all the time about long, full-scale blogs, right? Even if you're not doing that, even if you're only posting the sort of leading paragraph, the opening description, and a player on it, you're creating pages on your site on a consistent basis. You should see a little residual from that. If you have not done that, think about taking back, if you've only got 11 episodes, going back and seeing what putting a transcript in, what putting these blogs in, seeing how you can power through while you get through and get to your 25 episodes, and see if you're improving your site. So that's something that you can take action on right away. You don't have to create new content to make that happen. You can utilize the content you already created and give that boost and see what's going on there. The other thing, the second thing that I want you to try and do is I do want you to make more concerted action on your show. So asking people to participate, asking them for feedback, asking them for input, and giving them a place that's safe for them. They don't have to give you their email address. They don't have to go deeper yet. Maybe it's just message me on Facebook or send me an Instagram post or hashtag this, whatever it might be. You want to make sure that you're asking for feedback. If you haven't asked for it yet, and not just in your outro, but asking for specific input, like send me your questions, give me ideas for topics. I want to make this show useful to you. I hear that you're listening. I can see the listens out there. Now talk to me about this because I want to make this more valuable for you. Remember, it's in it for your audience. Now's the time to ask that. And you'd be surprised. I think that the thing for us that when we started our 3D print podcast, I don't think we really, we started it with these questions. Like we made them up because we knew we didn't have a feedback mechanism. We didn't have a big Facebook group. I don't even know.
We didn't even have an audience when we started.
So we didn't know. And, so we said, okay, well, here are the top 12 questions or 20 questions on 3D printing. Let's ask them as if it was somebody who asked us this. And so it was kind of ask Tom and Tracy anything.
And then we would answer the question.
Right. And we would do it like this because we were training the audience. We would say, Liam from New York, from Brooklyn, says this, and he asked this, and then we'd answer it. Now, of course, Liam's a good friend of ours, and we could use his name, and he didn't mind. And our friends and family thought it was kind of funny, and they were checking out our podcast anyway, so they get a little shout out, and it was kind of fun and quirky. Or we do something like we did this episode that was on the humidity factor in filament. It was really technical. Like, did the humidity affect the product? And so we said, well, let's pick a very humid place because we don't live in a humid place. So let's pick our friend Amy from New Orleans. And so we did that. And so, it kind of came this sort of way of training the audience that if you ask a question, we're going to answer you back. And pretty quickly on, so probably within the first dozen of episodes that we did, we got feedback from someone in Brazil, someone in Chicago, someone in South Africa. And so we got feedback from them saying, hey, I'll submit a question. And they would send us a question in. Some would do it over the website and some would do it on social media. But all of a sudden, we were training them to do it that way. So if that's the case, if you've not done that yet, try doing that. I think that's the next thing that you want to tackle on. And then the third thing to combat pod fading is to get yourself some support.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you've got a support group rooting you on, giving you new ideas, whether it's a podcast mastermind or it's just on coaching calls like we offer to every single one of our clients, doesn't matter how little or how much they spend with us, we have these coaching calls so that you guys can talk to each other and you can talk to us so that we can keep you motivated, right? And when you're out there saying to people, I'm doing this, you're more likely to keep doing it. So, give yourself that sort of back support, right? Give yourself the support behind the scenes of people who are rooting you on and want you to succeed.
And take advantage of support you have here from us. Absolutely. Alexandra, are there any questions by any chance, either on Facebook or on Zoom?
Not yet.
All right. If not, I want to give a shout out to Art Costello of Shower Epiphanies, because he has achieved quite something with his show. 2 days ago from during this live stream, his podcast was featured, it was charting on all of iTunes. You know how everybody has
the general category.
Yeah. When you go into iTunes, you obviously, your show might be listed in business, management, and marketing, or help, self-help, or some of these categories. And each of those categories has its own chart of the top 200 podcasts. But then there is just going into podcast, top episodes and top shows overall. And his show was number 180 out of the top 200 on Tuesday. Now, these charts change every day with, more shows that are published, but he was there for that day, number 180. That is quite an achievement. When we went in and looked at his podcast play statistics, he's had quite a surge in plays in the month of June. And so really what we saw is there was a correlation between the number of plays he was getting and the fact that he hit that high on the charts. And I screenshot it and I sent it to him because that's something you want to capture.
Yeah, you want to save that. So if that happens to you, now some of us don't pay attention to that, Tom.
I know.
No, we don't check it every day because I'm not obsessive about where my show is ranking. But gosh, if somebody messaged you and let you know, that's what the first thing you want to do is go take a screenshot of it.
Absolutely, because his show was up in the same screenshot are shows from NPR, New York Times, and certain TV personalities in
shows
the
that have been there a lot longer than ours.
And
yeah.
WTF, the big what's his
Mark
name?
Maron.
Mark Maron. WTF was on the same, within the same screenshot of. There's like 24 shows you could capture in a screenshot in the charts and seeing all the numbers. So anyway, that's a big deal, and I'm very excited for Art.
Me
So
too.
congratulations on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when this happens to you, analyze it too. Start to see where that search happened. It might have been you gave a speech at a great event and you remembered to shout out your podcast and the audience subscribed. So one of the things that I've gotten accustomed to doing is making sure that at some point in the talk, I make everybody pull their phones out, which is a dangerous thing to do. So make sure you do it at the right point in your talk. Have everybody pull out their phone and subscribe. And add value to them that way. Another thing that I've done is I've taken the show that I did or the event that I did and taken that talk and turned it into a podcast episode. So if they wanted to get the recording of it, the only way they could do it is subscribe to the show.
Great idea.
There's lots of things you can do to start to drive the audience back, because a lot of times I find people forget to mention their show when they're on stage.
And something like this could just happen because maybe you had a guest on your show that has a really large following on social media and they shared it with their audience. And then a lot of those people then learn about your show and they start to listen. There are many things that it could be an influencer, somebody sharing it. Many things could cause your show to all of a sudden get a lot more exposure.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I've seen from the interviews that I've been doing on Center of Influence recently. So Paul Vogelsang, Not Old, Better Show, he got picked up by the AARP magazine as being a podcast to listen to. I just had an interview today with someone I put into a list couple in 2015. I put him into my list. It was one of my early articles that I wrote for Inc. magazine, Innovation Crush with Chris Denson. And Chris now still podcasting, is doing incredibly well. His show is just like taken off. But some of the things he got picked up by things like Microsoft and other companies listing it in podcasts that you might want to check out for corporations and other things like that. And so that's really helped them. And so looking at those things is that may be a PR strategy for you, that maybe you'd like to be in more, I'm going to call it traditional media, right? To be polite, right? Things with actual pages and books and, getting an opportunity to be a part of that. They're still looking for podcast lists. They have those. Don't overlook the opportunity there because, for instance, in the AARP, it's highly read by their audience. So, their audience are retirees. They have time to read. If your show is appropriate to that, why not serve that up to them as an option and send them a story, send them a list of a bunch of shows, including yours. So those are some ways that you can get picked up by a large group. Another couple that I've heard that have happened is because they got picked up by the Autism Speaks or American Cancer Society, because the usefulness of the tips that they were giving in their show was so helpful to the families that community services. And so those can be ways as well. So do not forget about those organizations. Tapping into them can really draw and give you this shot into your listens. And when that happens, because you've just gotten this boost, look at what happened to Art. You get on the short list, the top 200. A
lot more exposure, and that can really help your show, regardless of what your goal is for your show. If it's just to serve others and help people, you're reaching more people. If it's actually to then help market and grow your brand or your business, that's going to help do that too. So it's no matter how you slice it, that's very good news. So
yeah. So
right.
I don't know if we have any questions. Alexandra will check that in a second. But please type in questions both on Facebook and on Zoom. Of course, if you're on Zoom, don't forget that we can bring you on if you want to have a hot seating kind of mentorship. Right. Happy to do that as well. So it's a great excuse to join in on Zoom. But we also have a sort of housekeeping note that we want to let you know about for our clients here. if you have a website change, a host change, like you move
right.
from GoDaddy to somebody else, or you move somebody else to GoDaddy, you need to let us know, because there's some configuration and some issues, and you can have an outage on your show.
You can have a real problem. Yeah. So we've had this happen recently with two different clients who they thought, well, I'm just moving my podcast. I'm changing from one host to another. Maybe it's to save a little money on your annual contract with them, or maybe it's because there's some new feature that you wanted to have for your website. Maybe it's more support, 24/7 dial-in support, whatever that reason is, doesn't really matter. If you move your website, you've got to make sure that that company that moves it is doing it properly, because we've had it happen where they move their website and they move their blogs, they move all the pages of their site, but they didn't actually move all the images in the image library. And so then suddenly they have all these broken images, broken links, images not showing up. And that's a terrible situation, because you thought, well, I'm not really changing the website, I'm just moving it from one host to another. That's a big problem. And the other thing that we have also learned in this process, that even if you're going from one WordPress website to another and everything's exported and re-imported, one of the things that you lose in those images are what are called alt tags. And these are keywords. Think of them as keywords for images. And that helps those images come up in Google searches when you do an image search versus a whole, the whole web search.
Right.
And, what we've seen, unfortunately, is a lot of problems caused for people who, pay this company to move all their site, and then only discover after the fact that their service doesn't pay attention to these details. And in order to then get everything restored to the way it was, you're going to have to pay a whole lot more money. And we've seen one of these companies propose charging their customer, oh, well, we said moving your site was going to be this much, but if you want that done, see, we don't do that. We're going to have to charge you a lot more money. And I don't think it was an intentional bait and switch to charge more money, to be honest. That's not my what I'm trying to say here. It's just that the end result was a lot more headache, a lot more time on the part of the host or the owner of the website in resolving and figuring this out, and more money spent at the end of the day, and nobody wants to have to do that.
Well, it makes you look so unprofessional in the meantime, while you've got all these broken links and all these other things while you're trying to resolve the problem. So please let us know ahead of time if you're planning a move like that. We can give you some best practices. hello@podetize.com is the best way for you to get that information. If that's happening to you, just message through there.
All right.
No questions.
No questions. All right, then we're gonna sign off.
I know it was a little
today.
different today, guys, because we had to switch it up, because tomorrow's our boot camp. So if you're watching this on a replay and you know someone who wants to start a podcast, we are running an all-day boot camp tomorrow, helping them get their show done. They still have to do it all themselves, but we're helping them with all the information.
Or maybe they're just researching and want to understand what it really takes to start a podcast. And that might be another good reason too. And so the URL for that, if you want to share it with anybody, I believe, Alexandra, isn't it podetize.com/bootcamp?
Yep.
All right. So podetize.com/bootcamp. If anybody that might be interested in attending a boot camp, or even if they sign up and they cannot attend tomorrow, they at least have access to the recordings. They can watch it on their time.
Right. And if you send somebody through to there, don't forget to send us a message and let us know that that's who you sent into the boot camp, because if they sign up with us, you get the credit for it.
Oh, that's right. All right. Well, I guess that's it. We're going to sign off. That's it for this week's client call. Thanks so much, everybody. Hope this was helpful for you. We'll talk to you next time.